Warning, this video does contain flashing images, as well as spoilers for the recent Sonic 3 movie. Do not watch under any circumstances. Hey, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, Sonic fanboy, Sonic supervillain. Now, for my last video, I had the audacity to make a video about Batman, and I realized my mistake. That isn't Sonic. I'm sorry, I recognize that's kind of a betrayal, and I really don't have any business making Batman content of any kind. But I wanted to make it up to you with the Sonic video to end all Sonic videos. This could be the last Sonic video I ever post, and it would be a satisfying conclusion. I've made sure the stars have really aligned for this one. It's a ranking video, I know everybody loves those, and I'm gonna be ranking Sonic the Hedgehog from worst to best, to determine which Sonic the Hedgehog is the best one, and which Sonic the Hedgehog is objectively bad. I am just memeing around, I will still make Batman content and stuff like that, you know. I never anticipated that last video doing gangbusters anyway, but I just kind of made a joke about how the next video could just be ranking every Sonic the Hedgehog, and then I thought that actually sounds kind of fun. Subscribe if you haven't already, and this video is brought to you by my many great patrons. If you want to become a patron, the link to the Patreon page is in the description below. All support hugely appreciated, thank you very much. Now, because this is basically a gag video, this is going to be 100% subjective. To hell with objectivity. Down with objectivity. In at number 10 is Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is by no means a bad game by the standard of other 8-bit titles. There's a lot of the kind of codes and conventions of 8-bit video gaming here, such as non-final boss fights that will kill you in a single hit, and barely telegraphed death planes, but it's not bad. As far as bringing Sonic to 8-bit consoles such as the Sega Master System and the Sega Game Gear, this does tickle the pickle. And even though it is a downgraded version of Sonic the Hedgehog, it is well worth checking out if you are a huge fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, because this one is comprised mostly of new zones. Of course, Green Hill Zone is in there, you've got Scrap Brain as the second before last stage, and you gotta throw in Labyrinth Zone because everybody loves that one. But you got tons of new zones this time, such as Bridge Zone, Jungle Zone, Sky Base. There's only 3? God damn, I remember there being more. Not gonna lie though, Sky Base is a better final stage than Scrap Brain. This one does have a more climactic finale than its 16-bit counterpart, which is actually kind of impressive. If you're not massively into 8-bit gaming, then there are gonna be some things that are gonna take getting used to, but ultimately it's a nice little B-side to its 16-bit counterpart, which is worth checking out. In at number 9 is Sonic the Hedgehog. Now I'm gonna hold my hand up and say I haven't seen all of Sonic the Hedgehog, but I think I've seen enough episodes to get the general vibe for what this show is going for. In terms of lore, Sonic the Hedgehog didn't have a great deal to pull from the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and its sequel, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Because narratively, there's not a great deal going on there, but they've adapted it. Obviously, Dr. Robotnik is quite an oppressive force in these games, so they've really dialed that up and made him an evil dictator, and Sonic is part of a band of freedom fighters who are out to take down Dr. Robotnik and take back Mobius. And what's quite cool about this show is it really doesn't talk down to its kid audience, going for a pretty serious tone, with Sonic effectively being the more comedic relief of the show, aside from, I guess, Antoine, but, like, nobody laughs at Antoine. There's some cool world building, though. We know that Sonic was raised by his Uncle Chuck. He's got a little romance going on with Princess Sally Acorn. I'm sure there's some absolutely disgusting freak out there that loves Sally Acorn in like a deeply sexual way, and I just want to put it out there, I would never be friends with someone like that. I would hate that guy. Patooey to that whole thing. Sorry, I have to take a temporary hiatus from the video. My beautiful wife Rouge the Bat is calling me for some sexy time. The thing is, Sonic the Hedgehog gives us a very kind of embryonic version of the Freedom Fighters. These characters are not as fleshed out as they would go on to be in later media, and the end result is just kind of so-so. The best thing about it is Dr. Robotnik, portrayed by Jim Cummings this time, because he plays a very sinister portrayal with his right-hand man, Snively. But I guess that is to be expected. If you make a piece of Sonic media and Dr. Robotnik doesn't absolutely steal the show, you must be basically worthless. But as far as Saturday morning cartoons go, this is solid. It's better than it really has any right to be, and I do like it. It's just that I like everything else on this list a bit better. In at number 8 is Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a Shogakukan manga series, and like the previously mentioned Sonic the Hedgehog expands on the world of Sonic the Hedgehog. But they're going for a really different approach that I would love to see explored just that little bit more. Mild-mannered Nicky the Hedgehog is a hedgehog who lives in Hedgehog Town and goes to Hedgehog School. And he's kind of a dork, he's meek, he's just completely the opposite of Sonic. He's not a cool guy. Well, except for the fact that he's got a girlfriend, Amy, and that's one more girlfriend than I have. So I guess he's still beating me in that area. Yeah, as far as being a fucking dork goes, I'm putting this guy on fraud watch. Well, I mean, at the same time, maybe it's better to have no GF than one that wants to cuck you non-stop with Sonic the Hedgehog, who happens to be Nicky's future self. You also get to know a bit of Nicky's family as well, such as Tanya Hedgehog, his little tomboy sister. Nicky's dad is a gruff Air Force guy, and Nicky's school bully is a tortoise called Anton. Truth be told, I fucking love this. It's full of charm and heart. It's impossible not to fall in love with these characters and this little world, even if it isn't exactly what you would expect from Sonic the Hedgehog. But it's kind of cool that they're going for kind of the Peter Parker and Spider-Man kind of dichotomy. And their idea of Dr. Eggman is quite literally an egg. The only one that knows Sonic's secret identity is Nicky the Hedgehog is Tails, something that Nicky himself doesn't even know. Also, Tails in this book is awesome. People always talk about how the West are the only ones to fucking bastardize Sonic, but this exists, and this is Japanese. It's almost like the best, most iconic fictional characters always have different takes. It's a little something called imagination, you narrow-minded shitheads. In at number 7 is Sonic the Hedgehog. I've kind of said all there is to say about Sonic the Hedgehog at this point. It's quite a timid little adventure, it doesn't really tap into the best aspects of the Sonic franchise, but it's still a good little story with good characters, showing that even in a fairly mundane, by-the-numbers safe blockbuster, Sonic the Hedgehog can still kind of shine through. Because when Sonic himself isn't on screen, boy would you ever not know this is a Sonic movie. But it's a good thing he is the central character of this movie, and the movie never loses sight of that, which does put it a cut above its contemporaries. It's a promising start, but what came after is really what sealed the deal for the Sonic movies universe. In at number 6 is Sonic the Hedgehog, and I know it is sacrilege to have Sonic the Hedgehog this low on the list of Sonic the Hedgehog. Because Sonic the Hedgehog started it all. Sonic the Hedgehog paved the way for every other Sonic the Hedgehog. Without Sonic the Hedgehog, there'd be no Sonic the Hedgehog. And I'll still stand by that Sonic the Hedgehog is still a great game. But like the movies, subsequent entries into this franchise have absolutely left this one in the dust. But it's not really just death by comparison. Sonic the Hedgehog does have its issues. Mainly that the opening level presents a mission statement of a physics-based platformer with lots of high speed, and then the vast majority of the levels after that put you in situations where you can't really utilize your speed. In Sonic the Hedgehog, there's only really 2 levels that I even want to replay, and that's Green Hill Zone and maybe Starlight Zone. Springyard Zone has its moments, it's kind of the middle ground between the sloggy platformer stages such as Marble Zone and Labyrinth versus the high-speed stages like Green Hill Zone. But it's just when you make such a strong first impression, but the rest of the game doesn't live up to it, yeah, it's kind of disappointing. I understand this knocked people's socks off when it came out back in 1991, but later installments effectively rendered this one obsolete. In at number 5 is Sonic the Hedgehog. This is a remake available on Android or iOS if you're a girl, and it makes major improvements from the Sonic the Hedgehog that it's based on, such as adaptive aspect ratio, a smooth 60 frames per second gameplay, remastered music, improved hit detection, you can actually save on this one, and Tails and Knuckles are unlockable as well. The issues with Sonic the Hedgehog are still present in Sonic the Hedgehog, but this is a much better version of the game, purely for its added content. In at number 4 is Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog was well and truly ahead of its time, in that this game is the most 2020s AAA game that ever was in 2006. See, at the time this released, video games were more about immersion, high-quality, polished experiences, whereas games now are more about being able to immerse yourself in the perspective of a video game developer who is playing a work-in-progress build. And then you get a fun additional activity in that you can go online and find out why this product is the way that it is. Or alternatively, you could be a video game journalist and make this your point of reference for every single piece of Sonic media, no matter how far down the line it is. I don't deny that this is a broken, messy game, but it's just fundamentally what this thing is doing. I kind of vibe with it. I know you're thinking you're crazy. How can you say Sonic the Hedgehog is better than Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, I'm not saying it's objectively better than Sonic the Hedgehog. No two ways about it. Sonic the Hedgehog knew what it wanted to be and succeeded at doing that, whereas Sonic the Hedgehog is trying to be the ultimate magnum opus of video gaming and absolutely stumbles its way out of the gate. But when you get to grips with the very backwards, unintuitive way that Sonic the Hedgehog wants to be played, because it was designed with a mallet in one hand and a piano in the other, you can eventually just play it kind of like it's a normal game and have a lot of fun with it. It's a massive epic with an incredible story that has Sonic, Shadow, and Silver traveling through time and space, battling it out with demons, making sure a princess doesn't cry so that all hell doesn't break loose. There's all kinds of crossed wires and miscommunications, and yeah, it's a little on the messy side, but I don't love something because it's objectively perfect. I love it because it's just kind of cool. Everything this game is trying and failing to do is just awesome. When I lock in and I sit down and I play Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm not gonna lie, I do have more enjoyment playing Sonic the Hedgehog than I do Sonic the Hedgehog. Is it better than Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and 3? Hell no. Hell no. Those games are way better than Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog. But in my opinion, this is my favorite of the Sonic the Hedgehog games to be called Sonic the Hedgehog. Which means there'll be no more Sonic the Hedgehog games on this list, and I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, you forgot all about Sega Ages Sonic the Hedgehog. No, I didn't, because that game is called Sega Ages Sonic the Hedgehog, not Sonic the Hedgehog. What about Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis on the Game Boy Advance? No, that's called Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. I'm gonna need that subtitle to be moved way down the box art before I consider this one to be called Sonic the Hedgehog. Just like my number 3 pick, which is Sonic the Hedgehog, which is definitely the better of the two movies to be called Sonic the Hedgehog. I've said things that have contradicted this in the past, but ignore them. They're old, this is new, this one's up to date. Sonic the Hedgehog is a straight-to-video anime comprised of 2 episodes, but you can kind of put them together and it makes a movie. And if you look at the box art, it says the movie on it, but it's so low down that it is not a subtitle or anything like that. It is just Sonic the Hedgehog, which happens to be a movie. Them's the rules I just made up now, so suck it. Sonic the Hedgehog is a head-empty adventure that sees Sonic and his best pal Tails teaming up with Dr. Robotnik to take on the deadly Metal Robotnik in the land of Robotropolis. But it turns out it's all a trap so that Dr. Robotnik can harvest Sonic's biodata to create Hyper Metal Sonic. Also that while Sonic is preoccupied fighting Hyper Metal Sonic, Dr. Robotnik can marry the president's daughter, Sarah, who kinda has a thing for Sonic, maybe? Knuckles is also in this. I'm not saying this is the best of the Sonic movies by any stretch, but at the same time, it is the one that most delivers on an authentic experience to the video games. Watching this feels like playing a Sonic game in that it's a head-empty adventure, ramps up into some pretty epic action. This predates Revenge of the Sith, by the way, with a jumping soundtrack, and that's everything I hope for from Sonic. So hell yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog is great. In at number 2 is Sonic the Hedgehog from IDW Publishing. This is the current Sonic the Hedgehog comic series, which uses Sonic Forces of all things as kind of the launchpad for a series of brand new stories. The resistance of Sonic Forces has now become Restoration, as a ragtag team led by Amy Rose seek to restore the planet Earth after Dr. Robotnik conquered it in Sonic Forces. Now I won't lie, this being the catalyst for all the stories going forwards has gone on a bit too long. Sonic and his friends are less some youngsters going on adventures, so much as they are effectively a military organization, and it's been that way since the start of the comic, and it hasn't shown any signs of changing. And it ultimately feels like the Freedom Fighters, but with all of the characters of the Western Sonic mythology scooped out of it. And you end up with something that feels like just what's left, a remnant of a previous era of Sonic comic book storytelling. IDW Sonic also definitely has its peaks and valleys. There are some issues where it just feels like nothing's happening and you're wasting your time. But what defines IDW's Sonic the Hedgehog for me is ultimately its best stories. Because there really have been some sensational ideas in this run. An amnesia-riddled Dr. Robotnik going by the name of Mr. Tinker, who is tragically reverted to his old ways by a fanboy scientist, Dr. Starline. The introduction of Surgeon Kit, and how they kind of challenge the philosophy of the hero characters. The dramatic showdown between Dr. Robotnik and Dr. Starline. The incredible Neo-Metal Sonic arc, which really capitalized on this character's potential. And the crown jewel, the Metal Virus saga. Easily one of the most intense Sonic stories ever told, as the circumstances are the most dire they've ever been, and a story that they've so far never topped. Sonic the Hedgehog from IDW Comics has had some tremendous stories, which really do accelerate this entry to the top of the list, bar one. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick honorable mention to Sonic the Hedgehog. This is the novelization of the 2020 Sonic the Hedgehog movie. The reason it's an honorable mention is because I haven't fucking read it, so I'm not gonna rank it. But in first place is Sonic the Hedgehog from Archie Comics. Now, the quality of this one is probably even more all over the map than the IDW Sonic series. But when they get good, they do stay consistently good. The Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic series spans eras and eras of Sonic storytelling. Going from the classic era through the Dreamcast era to the more modern era, you've got adaptations of the classic games that released alongside those classic games, but then you've even got things like an Unleashed story arc. But what's really great about this series is that the writers involved with it were given a lot of creative freedom compared to other Sonic projects, which led to some very unique character explorations. We were able to see sides of these characters that you wouldn't see in the games. But it's also cool how these began at a time when there wasn't as much to pull from when it came to Sonic media. And rather than just reboot things totally to make things in line with the games that were coming out later, they'd work those stories into their own continuity, giving this series its own very unique identity. You've got the Michael Gallagher era, which was very much a pun-fueled, funny pages sort of thing. Really inconsequential stories that had a fair deal of charm and were kind of like a midway point between the Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon and the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. But then you've got Ken Penders' contributions, which take themselves very seriously and just go utterly insane with some of the concepts. But the point where these comics get really good is the point where Ian Flynn took over. Rather than rebooting things to fit his own agenda, Ian Flynn instead opted to honor the rich history of the Archie Sonic media and build off of that. The pre-boot Ian Flynn era of Archie Sonic has some of the greatest Sonic character exploration that you will find anywhere. These comics offer a more matured perspective on Sonic the Hedgehog. People will clown on the relationship drama, and yeah, I'm not massively into the soapy relationship side of things of the Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comics, but it's a side of these characters that you're never going to explore anywhere else. The relationship between Sonic and Sally Acorn is a fairly healthy relationship, aside from a couple of blips here and there. Sonic's friendship with Tails is really put to the test over Sonic's short-lived relationship with Fiona, and they resolve this in a really mature way. This comic series has kind of a bad reputation because a lot of very out-of-context panels posted online, and Ken Penders' very unique approach to storytelling. But a long-running series like this, to me, is not defined by its lows, it's defined by its highs. You've got the Freedom Fighters from the Sonic Saturday morning cartoon, and there's a story here where Antoine, who I never cared about in the Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon, is getting married to Bunny Rabbit. And it's a really good story that really made me care about these two. Things do tidy themselves up a bit with the post-reboot era of Archie Sonic. This is when Sega started to kind of pull in the reins a little bit. And what you have with the post-reboot is a little less out there, a little more archetypically Sonic, but it's still home to some really great ideas and a very fleshed out version of the Sonic universe. I think post-reboot Archie Sonic is just a great middle ground for everything Sonic can be, which is why Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog is the best Sonic the Hedgehog of them all. But I'm not done, because I got a couple more things to talk about that are not worth a separate video. We're gonna rank every Sonic the Hedgehog 2 now. Yeah, why not? There's a lot less of these, but they're a bit harder to rank because for the most part, the Sonic 2s are better than the Sonic 1s. But I'm committed to the bit. Let's do this. This was originally supposed to be a ridiculous video, but now I'm kind of locked in. So this one only has 4 entries, so let's just get started. In at number 4 is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is awful. That is the only time on this list I'm going to be saying this, but Sonic the Hedgehog 2 sucks. Even by 8-bit standards, this is a stinker. And no, freeing up screen real estate so it can play on the Master System doesn't fix this. Sonic the Hedgehog was a perfectly serviceable 8-bit title that did a nice job in delivering the Sonic experience to 8-bit consoles. Albeit with some of the quirks of its 8-bit contemporaries, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 shifts gears in that it is really difficult for no good reason, and it is just obnoxious. It's also buggy as well. Trap placements are unbelievably dickish. Boss fights, while surprisingly actually kind of inventive in parts, still kill you in one hit, but this time they're a bit less predictable. This hang glider, which is for some reason the focus of this game's marketing, is super unintuitive. And it's really just kind of a gimmick mechanic so that they could just make a level that is basically a massive spike bed and call it a day. There are glimmers of goodness in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but they're constantly interrupted by the game's dickish difficulty. That being said, there are ideas here that I really like as kind of a B-side to Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the 16-bit game. Rather than Tails being your little buddy that follows you, your goal of this game is to rescue him by collecting all of the Chaos Emeralds. And if you don't, there are some very questionable implications here. Like, what did they mean by this? Underground Zone is admittedly a cool opening level because of its contrast to Green Hill Zone in the prior Sonic the Hedgehog. In fact, I really like some of the level themes here. It's just a shame I hate to play them. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is an absolute stinker. In at number 3 is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, is a huge improvement on Sonic the Hedgehog. This one's finding its feet a lot more with that Sonic the Hedgehog identity. We've got Tails and Knuckles in the mix now. And the story is a loose adaptation of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Dr. Robotnik is looking much more like himself. They really did Knuckles justice here as well, and his dynamic with Sonic and their two backstories kind of clashing is great. The action is much better this time, and just seeing the trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles up against Dr. Robotnik is enough to make a Sonic fan squeal with joy. The downside is that there's a lot of very juvenile humor, and they stop the action dead in the middle of the movie for a 6-minute long wedding scene, which not only has no business being here, it doesn't really make any narrative sense either. I go into more detail about the absolute failure that this scene is in my retrospective, which I guess I'll try and link somewhere, be it the pinned comment or the description, I don't know, I haven't decided yet. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you were doing so well, but on a whole, this is still a great movie, despite some pretty glaring flaws. In at number 2 is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I mentioned how Sonic the Hedgehog had a really great opening level, and it didn't live up to that afterwards. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 really addresses that. And with that problem out of the way, boy do we have an incredible Sega Mega Drive game on our hands here. So you've got the really great movement of the original Sonic the Hedgehog here. The pinball physics, the high-speed action, except now it's been improved. There's no longer a speed cap, and he's got this little spin dash that he can rev up for a quick burst of speed. But now we're pairing this great gameplay with consistently good levels that actually allow you the chance to really utilize Sonic's unique abilities. Tails makes a great addition to the story this time, introducing some fun multiplayer capabilities. The story is just that bit more grandiose, and it feels bigger as well. It feels like an epic, even down to its surprisingly cathartic ending. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 really does a great job at building on top of and improving everything about its predecessor. Is it perfect? No. Once you get to Oil Ocean, it's all kind of downhill from there. But it's a really good run up until that point, and I can see why it's a lot of people's favorite 16-bit game. Admittedly, I'm more of a Sonic 3 and Knuckles guy, but Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is still a fantastic title. Quick honorable mention, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie novelization. And, I haven't read it. In at first place is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This is the remake of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, available on Android or iOS if you're a girl. And like the mobile version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, this once again has 60 FPS gameplay, adaptive aspect ratio, saving, you can play as Knuckles. I probably should have mentioned that the UI is great in these games, but one thing this game does is add a little extra content. You see, the original Mega Drive Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was kind of chock full of unused content. What we got with Sonic 2 was quite a scaled back version of the original intentions for that title. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on mobile takes the opportunity to reinstate one of those lost levels, in the form of Hidden Palace Zone, which is quite literally hidden beneath the Mystic Cave Zone. And it's a really great level, with its own unique boss fight as well, which you'll end up playing rather than the remainder of Mystic Cave. This addresses an issue in that there was just this spike bed pit that you couldn't get out of before, and fills it with a really substantial piece of new content. So I dig it. That's why it's the best of the Sonic the Hedgehog 2s on this list. Now finally, we're going to be ranking all of the Sonic the Hedgehog 3s, which you'll think is going to be really difficult, because my god, the Sonic 3s are just amazing. But we're gonna rank them anyway. In at number 4 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the Tiger Electronic handheld game, and someone didn't tell Tiger Electronics that you don't sell Happy Meal toys for $30. This might amuse a very small child with very low expectations for about 5 seconds. But other than that, I don't think I have a single good thing to say about this. The little device itself looks alright, I guess. But this can best be described as tat. It is tat. In at number 3 is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on the Sega Genesis. This was a promotional cartridge given out to influencers to promote Sonic the Hedgehog 3 the movie. This isn't really a game as such, more just a series of bit-compressed posters and sound files. But it was a really neat idea, and the cartridge looks very cool, and it is home to kind of a game in that you could move left and right and jump, but that's really all you could do. But you could enter a little cheat code which would reveal when the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 Trailer 2 would drop. This was a really cool little idea, but I didn't get one, so it sucks. It's garbage. It's objectively bad. Now, honorable mention, the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie novelization. Haven't read it. Okay. Right. So, here's where it gets really difficult. Because Sonic the Hedgehog 3 the movie is one of the better pieces of Sonic media, but that third Sega Mega Drive Sonic game is also absolutely sensational with its revolutionary lock-on Wait a minute. Oh, that just makes this very easy, because Sonic 3 and Knuckles is not called Sonic the Hedgehog 3 now, is it? It's called Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it's only accessible through lock-on technology. There is, of course, a game called Sonic the Hedgehog 3, or Sonic 3 Sonic the Hedgehog, if you are looking at the title screen. It says it on the box art, so I'm calling it. Now, admittedly, this still isn't the easiest decision in the world, but I am going to say that in second place is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is ultimately only half of a game. Half of a fantastic game. Half of probably the greatest 16-bit title of all time? Sure. But it is only half, and the result is it does feel like it ends fairly abruptly. Like how Sonic 2 just took everything that made Sonic 1 good and made it amazing, Sonic 3 takes everything that makes Sonic the Hedgehog 2 a 9 out of 10 and makes it a fucking 15 out of 10. Stages are bigger, there's more of an emphasis on story, you've got some incredible cutscenes in there. You've got mini boss fights now for the Act 1s, the little gold plate can now be interacted with for extra rewards, bonus stages on top of special stages. Knuckles the freaking Echidna. Like, Jesus, even if this is only half of the game it's supposed to be, it is still a fantastic title. And maybe a bit of a hot take, I do prefer some aspects of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Those being the mini-boss music for one, and Knuckles' theme music. I just prefer that more hip-hop inclination that this one has. So it's a bit of a pinch between this and my number 1 pick, but in first place is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. This movie adapts one of the best Sonic stories ever made, one of the most iconic Sonic stories ever made, that being Sonic Adventure 2. You've got the fully formed team of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles up against Shadow the Hedgehog, Dr. Ivor Robotnik, and Professor Gerald Robotnik. Shadow being kind of this mirror of who Sonic could have been if he allowed his grief to truly overcome him and catch up to him. Ivor Robotnik is, of course, a very cruel, manipulative, callous individual. The only person he could ever love is basically himself, and with Gerald he is confronted by himself, and Gerald discards him like a piece of trash, just like he does Agent Stone. So you take that kind of mirror image dichotomy that Sonic and Shadow had and apply it to Dr. Robotnik as well. The result is an incredibly compelling, action-packed story that's genuinely a spectacular blockbuster for all the family, and in some ways, an improvement upon the game's story that it's based on. Partly just for being a bit more nuanced and tidied up, but also because Knuckles has a bigger role in it this time. And when you give Knuckles the spotlight, great things happen. Take notes, Knuckles. I love Sonic the Hedgehog 3 so much, I'm gonna buy the Steelbook and put it right next to my Steelbook of Sonic Adventure 2. So there you go, what started off as a gag video ended up with me becoming surprisingly enthusiastic about the topic. What do you guys think, though? What would be kind of your rankings in these categories? I'd say comment below, but please do elaborate on which version you mean. This video is going to be a nightmare to edit. Of course, if you do want to support me further, the link to my Patreon page is in the description below, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos, watch ad-free videos, get bonus content, and download the videos. That's less than a YouTube Premium subscription is all I'm saying. A special shout out goes to the patrons in the $5 and above tiers, and here they come rolling down the red carpet. We got Seppo the Smith, Silva, Josh Strider, Grant Allen, Twilord, Coco 210, Hey It's Classy, Ian, Joe Henshin, KB, RT0, Kalex, Hypes, Sad Goku, Dare Denny, SSS06, Kale Bennett, unrelated but Ace Attorney rocks. Yeah, I suppose it does, I haven't played it though. Ken K, Mr. SP, Saurus the Skeptic, Biotin, and Vera Wild. Thank you folks so much for your generosity, and to all of you at home, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Now get out of here. I'm gonna make the next video a Batman one just to spite you.